Hello all you crazy 70s sci-fi fans, as always I am Cosmic and today we're going to be reviewing Headlander, a Metroidvania style puzzle platformer developed by Double Fine and published by Adult Swim Games. Isn't it nice to have a Double Fine game that actually feels complete for the first time in a very long time? I used to be a very big fan of Double Fine with things like Brutal Legend, and recently, ever since the kind of Kickstarter stuff, we're talking Broken Age and things like Massive Chalice, games that they've produced have just felt either completely underdeveloped, not fleshed out, or in the case of Broken Age, a game of two halves that felt completely different to each other, that didn't really live up to the expectations set by the Kickstarter. I felt that Double Fine have been on a fairly slippery slope. With that also comes my tentative dislike of Tim Schafer's products and his style of developing video games, which feels often very loose and fast with not a great attention to detail or indeed quality at the moment. And it's nice to actually find a game finally that Double Fine has produced that Tim Schafer didn't really have that much to do with, and it turns out to be an absolute stellar game. Headlander is set in a futuristic sci-fi setting where you are the last known human and you no longer have a body because the entire human race has basically been uploaded into a cloud drive and everyone is all robots now, and they are all controlled by a supreme robot known as Methuselah. The game is very similar to Logan's Run. It's set in that kind of 70s style that I think works really well with the overall tone of the game. The aesthetic is fantastic, the visuals are great, the sound, the voice acting quality, everything is right on point, and it just produces something that is really fun to play. So in Headlander you play the last known human who still has flesh and bone, and you don't particularly have that much of it because the only thing that you have left is your head, which is encased in a special helmet. Now this helmet can jetpack it around essentially with a rocket. It can also have it has a vacuum so you can suck things to it and all that fun stuff. And essentially the goal of the game is to recapture humanity, bring back humanity with the help of your allies and fight against Methuselah and do a lot of Metroidvania style things, which is run, shoot, jump around, solve puzzles, etc. Mechanically the game works really well. I have to say that I was a little bit disappointed with some of the puzzles. I feel that a lot of it is oversimplistic and I would have liked a little bit more challenge in that regard. The challenge usually does come from in the enemies. It can be somewhat challenging because you get shot a lot and you die a lot, which is all well and good. I think that I like that aspect of the game to be challenging. The major problem I have with the combat is the controls. I don't feel that they are... I mean, this is a game that you really need a controller for to really be accurate. And even then, I feel that the controls and the accuracy of the controls aren't quite up to standard. But it works well enough that it is not that noticeable most of the time. And the game is designed in such a way that it is relatively forgiving in most parts of the game. As you progress through the levels in the 2.5D world, you get to do a lot of things, and the fun part of the game, and I think the most unique part, is the head itself, the detachable head. So you can take over robot bodies, various different things. So you can take over enemies, you can suck the head off an enemy combatant and then take over their body and shoot the rest of the enemies. You also have various civilian robots walking around and you can take over them. I personally like taking over dogs because it's a lot of fun to see you run around with a human head on a dog's body. And the whole game has this humour-filled essence about it, which works very well. There's a lot of dick jokes, there's a lot of crude jokes, there's a lot of funny references and innuendos, and I think that the entire thing is really funny and it works very well. The combined humour with the 70s sci-fi aesthetic and the colour scheme and the way that everything is laid out just works and gels perfectly. The thing to understand about Headlander is that it's nothing new. There's nothing new there in terms of mechanics or anything like that. It's just executed in a very well manner. I think that if I was to criticize it in any short form, I would say I like the fact that it is a fast-paced game, that you can go through levels and blitz through everything. I think it could have done with a little bit of a shorter story, because I felt that certain parts of the game were fairly repetitive and unnecessarily repetitive in some, which it kind of brought this feeling about, oh, well, this is getting a little bit monotonous, it's getting a little bit boring now because I'm just doing the same thing over and over, and I would just like to get on with it. That being said, however, I think that where the game shines is, like I've said, in its style, in its execution, and I think those parts, including the humour and the execution of the story and the execution of the mechanics and aesthetic, they kind of gloss over any irritating parts of the game in a way that, you know, it makes even the most repetitive, irritating parts of the game feel less like a big deal because it is overall a really fun game. I really like the fact that there's plenty to explore in the game because your helmet can be upgraded to, you know, have shields and have increased health and increased power for your vacuum, so you can suck the heads off enemies from further away and that kind of thing. And all of these upgrades you have to actually search for. They're not laid out for you, and the game doesn't hold your hand and tell you where to go. It gives you a map, it says go explore and get your objectives done, and it's down to you to go through it. And I like that about the game. I think that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed going through, solving the puzzles, finding all the upgrades for my helmet, and, you know, destroying all the enemies and sucking the heads off robots. It's a lot of fun. And yes, this is probably the only game ever that you will ever hear me use the term sucking the heads off robots. In terms of the narrative itself, I think that while the story is trope heavy, so to speak, because you can see already where it's kind of going, it does kind of avoid some usual tropes and some downfalls where other games may have had problems, and it does overall produce a really nice story, a really nice setting, and some really fun dark humour in there that's quite funny. And ultimately it was just a fun little story in a fun little game that doesn't take itself seriously, doesn't want you to take it seriously, and it's just a fun little game to play by yourself and have a good time with. And then once you're done, and you just look back and think, well, that was a good game, what's next? And ultimately, I think that in itself, especially for a Double Fine game of late, is something unique unto itself. It's very rare in the past, 5 years that I've played a Double Fine game and I've said, oh, well, that was a good game. Because... And it's very rare to have a Double Fine game where I've said, well, that was good, but there was this, and this. Instead, it's, well, there was a couple of repetitive moments in there, there was a couple of irritating things, but overall the execution, the aesthetic, and everything blended so well together that any problems that were in the game were kind of glossed over for the most part, and they were very, very minor. And that in itself is a big step up from what has been over the past couple of years with Double Fine. Overall, I think Headlander is a great Metroidvania style game. It doesn't do anything innovative, but that in itself, its execution, it does really well. And you don't need to be innovative sometimes, you just need to execute what you want very well, and Headlander does that. I think that if you enjoy Metroidvania style games, you enjoy puzzle platformers, then this will be right up your alley. And I think that the dark humour and all the humour imbued, which no doubt comes with having Adult Swim as your publisher, I think that if you enjoy humour, ultimately, even if you don't enjoy Metroidvania style games, I think this one is probably worth a look, because I think it may be enjoyable to people who don't enjoy Metroidvania style games or puzzle platformers in a general sense. And ultimately, it's a great game, and, you know, credit where credit's due. Maybe a Double Fine game, but it's a great game nonetheless, and well done to them for creating something that was not only fun to play, but it was funny to watch and listen. And that is my review of Headlander. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you liked the video, do like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And as always, I will see you next time.